Arsenal nil, Sporting Lisbon nil, and we are in the semi-final of the Champions League. And yet, it doesn't really feel that way. It's interesting because I feel like it's only Arsenal Football Club that can have you, in the middle of April, being 6 points clear at the top of the Premier League into a semi-final of the Champions League, and yet somehow, for whatever reason, you feel deflated. Only this football club can do that to you. But I think that the reason for that is because when you actually look at the trajectory of this football club, and particularly with its results and as well with its style of play and its performances, we're only looking it only looks like we're going downwards. That's the reality. And Atletico Madrid is no joke. And even if we do manage to get past them, it's going to be either Bayern or PSG in a final. And the reality is that I'm fearful of them. In fact, I'm even fearful of City on the weekend. But despite that, you put that all to the side. At the end of the day, you are a fan. And as a fan, there always is a little part of you that's giddy and excited, and you start to dream, and the footballing brain versus the footballing heart of the fan begins to sort of conflict with one another, and you start to maybe think, hey, maybe this is our year, maybe we can do this. But before I get all giddy and excited and hopeful, and I start giving the kind of speech that you see in the Disney movie, I want to just look at the game today, the performance as a whole, and what I took from it. And the reality is that I'm walking away feeling a bit disappointed. We haven't been playing well. And I think all of us were expecting to get through Sporting. We should be getting through Sporting, especially when you look at the difference in caliber between the two teams. And so today, I think really everyone, if you're looking at this holistically, had an eye on the City game on the weekend. And this was, I think, the perfect opportunity to kind of platform how we were going to play and showcase what was going to come. Were we going to see a little bit more of attacking play today? Were we going to see a little bit more fluidity, a bit more creativity? Were we going to see a sign of the style and the kind of football that is actually going to be able to get us a result at the Etihad? And unfortunately, I didn't see that today. In fact, I think we tried certain things, but it didn't really work, and it was a bit stale. And across 180 minutes against Sporting Lisbon, we scored one goal. That's not really what you expect of champions. Truly, it's not. So, it's not just me. Arteta was also saying this leading up to the game. He was talking about fire. He was talking about wanting to play with fire and more intensity. He identified a couple of different things that he wanted to address across the pitch. He alluded to maybe 3-4 different things. I mean, you know this guy. This guy's like Jesus. He's always speaking in parables. And I was trying to sit down today and see, okay, what was different today? What was he trying to do? And I did identify a couple of things, but once again, it leaves me with more questions than it does answers. But the first thing that makes me kind of giggle when I see the game is that he talks about fire and wanting to be more creative and more attacking and to play with more intensity, and he starts the game with 4 center backs. 4 center backs and a double pivot. And you talk about wanting to be more intense and have fire. I mean, that's the first thing. Now, one of the first things that I actually noticed was that Nkapie was actually so high up today in his inverted role. He was almost sometimes just as high up as Eze was, or even as Martinelli was, which I don't have a problem with. In fact, I think it's something that we need to deploy, especially against City. I think we need to pack the midfield. But if you're going to have your fullback inverting and playing so high up, why not play Lewis Skelly, who I think is much more comfortable and is actually better suited to that role as a fullback, as opposed to the more defensive role that we sometimes ask our fullbacks to carry out. So, although I think he had the right idea, but wanted to kind of deploy the fullback in that particular position, in that particular way, it was the wrong personnel once again for Mikel. I think Miles Lewis-Skelly was the obvious choice for that particular role. Another thing that I noticed was that Zubimendi was actually pushing a little bit higher up, almost playing as another 8, which I'm fine with. I think either him or Rice can actually take on that role rather well. In fact, I would actually prefer Rice to do it than Zubimendi. But we didn't see enough rotations there from the midfield. And what I mean by rotations is that typically when you have a very stagnant midfield and you're going to sort of be cycling positions, the idea is to draw sort of markers out of play. So, for example, if I'm playing with a standard 3-man midfield, my left-sided 8 is going to drop in a little bit deeper as my holding midfielder is going to go towards the right-sided 8, and then my right-sided 8 is going to shift to the left-sided 8. In other words, you almost see a rotation amongst the 3 of them. And the purpose of this truly is to not only draw certain defensive markers out of position, But as you do that rotation, you move into the space that the other person is drawing a marker away. And that's kind of how you're able to play the ball through, especially when teams are pressing you very well. So although we saw Zubimendi kind of push up a little bit higher to the unoccupied space, we didn't see Ebericha Eze drop into a deeper number 8 role to actually occupy the space. Zubimendi should have pushed up. Rice should have fallen to the particular side that he was originally in, and then Eze drops a little bit deeper, and they're all sort of pulling markers away from their respective positions to create the openings. We didn't see that from Eze. So all we're doing is Zubimendi trying to get high up on the pitch, waiting for the ball to get out wide to one of the fullbacks, and then hoping that they could sort of, break through, and then now we have an extra body through the attack. But it still prevented us from playing through the middle of the park in the first place when Sporting had 4 guys in the middle of the park, forcing us to go out wide. So that didn't really help us. So although you had the right idea there, Mikel, in terms of pushing Zubimendi a little bit higher, once again, you didn't have the right personnel in Ebericha Eze, who is not really the kind of person who can play as a 10 and is capable of dropping in deep to be able to collect the play. He can't really do that. So that was another thing that I noticed, but once again, lacking the personnel. And then the next thing that I noticed him doing was that Madueke and Martinelli were actually coming a little bit shorter on the ball at times when we were kind of playing out from the back. And not only were they coming in short, but they were actually kind of coming a little bit closer to Eze and trying to, get the ball in those particular half spaces. But once again, once they actually did get the ball, it was very congested in the middle of the park because now you have the likes of Gyökeres, Eze, and a winger almost occupying those same central positions, and you don't really have a fullback on the overlap that is now allowing them to exploit the space that they just came from. So they did get the ball, but they kind of then just ran into traffic. They're now sort of all marking themselves by all being the center of the pitch, and you didn't have enough fluidity there. So again, another decent idea, one that can actually work very well in a particular double pivot, but you then need fullbacks that can go on the overlap to give you that width, to give the fullback something to think about. And now he's kind of in a if I do, if I don't, do I follow the winger and kind of leave my flank exposed, and now they can get the ball in behind and they have multiple guys running into the box? Or do I let him take the overlapping fullback, and now they have a numerical advantage, and it's 3 versus 2 in terms of the striker, the 10, and the winger attacking my center halves. And now you have a numerical advantage. But we didn't really see that from Mosquera. We didn't really see Mosquera sort of bombing on the overlap, and even if he did, he's a center back. He can't really execute that role. So once again, employing ideas, but yet not having the right personnel to execute them. Not really sure what he was trying to do there. So those are the 3 different things that I kind of identified in the game that were slightly different, and I don't think they were executed well. And that leaves me a little bit disappointed because I am looking at this game with an eye on City and trying to see, okay, is there something that I can take from this where I can say, okay, at the Etihad, we're going to get a result. And the reality is that I didn't take anything away from it. Now, maybe Arteta wasn't doing that. I'll hold my hands up and I can maybe say, hey, that wasn't Arteta. I know what he was doing. He's a very pragmatic man. His approach was, let me put some very, defensive players on who I know can, defend the lead. I'm in control of the tie. I'm 1-0 up. I don't need to take the game to Sporting. Sporting needs to take the game to me. So I'm going to put, the most defensively sound, defenders that I have and make sure that I'm soaking up the pressure. And as they commit more men forward, I'm going to have the likes of Martinelli, Madueke, and Gyökeres running in behind the players that I think are more comfortable running in behind and exploit the spaces that they're going to give me. And as the game carries on, I'll then put in my more technical players to sort of see the game out, and basically kill them by 1,000 passes. Maybe that was a strategy, and if that was the case, then fair enough. But what is kind of interesting is that imagine if you are a Sporting Lisbon fan, or not even that, imagine if you knew any Sporting Lisbon fans and they were to say, man, we were the much better team across 180 minutes. I think we were much better than Arsenal. We played them off the park. We created a lot more chances. We created the best chances across both ties. But the reality is that we weren't clinical enough. We were hard done by. On another day, if we actually had our shooting boots on, I think we would have easily gotten past them in this particular tie. Would they be wrong? Would it be crazy of them to say that? Or would you have to say, nah, fair enough, you're probably right. Arsenal only really created one clear chance, and it was perhaps a lapse of concentration from your defenders in the final minute of the first leg. So as pragmatic as you can say Arteta was being, and maybe he was just looking at this game in isolation, and I can hold my hands up and I can come on here and just say I'm chatting shit, did Arsenal really? Was this the kind of 1-0 where Arsenal was knocking on the door and constantly creating chances? They were just defending like crazy to holding on, or were we the ones holding on? Maybe it didn't feel that way because the half chances, because let's call it what they were. They were half chances. It's not like they were, 2-on-1 empty net. They were half chances. But if it was Lamine Yamal or Barcola or Dembele or Kvaratskhelia or Elise or Luis Diaz or Julian Alvarez or Harry Kane getting those chances, it'd be a very different story. So that's how I'm feeling after all of this. We're into another semifinal. Hopefully we get through it. It's going to be a couple weeks until we face Atletico, and by then, hopefully, Arteta has something up his sleeve and he can change some things around so that we can look a little bit more lively on the ball. We'll do another preview of the City game because there's a lot to talk about there in terms of personnel and who I want to see play and what I think the approach will be. We'll do a separate video on that. But those are just kind of my thoughts from this particular game, and I don't know. I think only Arsenal can have you feeling down after progressing to a semifinal of the Champions League. Only Arsenal Football Club. And I guess I wouldn't really have it any other way. Thank you guys for watching.